going to attempt an ASMR hike today. Tonight, it's getting a little late. I hope the sound of the train is good. I didn't put on my demonetization pants tonight. It's a little warm for those. But should you sacrifice everything for your art, get that swishy sound of the pant legs rubbing together, and risk demonetization, or go with the clothing dictated by the conditions? I guess that's what I'm doing. This is a lovely little spot on this trail, the Douglas Fir Trail. All along this hillside, there are these slopes, the springs. And I'd talk to you a little bit. Let you listen for a little while first. About springs, about a book which mentions them. It's called Story of Q. And the premise of it, as far as I can tell from reviews and comments, a more beautifully written and entertaining version of a scholarly debate. One of the characters in this book, he hears, as a metaphor for the voice of the divine, the sound of a stream that no one else hears, and which over many years has had edifices built upon it, so that only those approved by officialdom can access the voice of the waters. Today, I'm getting these other little things that anyone else who spends all their time after having watched a number of these videos piecing together obscure clues would take note of. Number one is this thing I'm using to film the video. I got it in a blowout sale for $1. And it's called Monopod. A more specialized version of this is the selfie stick. The selfie stick is has a shutter on it for taking pictures. The monopod is used for aiming things. Taking aim. But it seems a very strange name to use in marketing. Doesn't sound very appealing to me. Why not just call your thing a unipod? Should go very well with one of the slogans of the decoders these days, where we go one, unified, we go all. Instead, there's a blowout on these devices called monopods. Now, mono is something with rather negative connotations in English slang because it's short for mononucleosis, a disease spread by blood and other bodily fluids, which manifests from something called the Epstein-Barr virus. It's not like people named Epstein and Barr haven't been in the news lately, but it seems to me that when you name the virus after Epstein and Barr, they should have been either working together or working in competition but toward the same end, which would not cast them in the same light as popular culture recently has. Similarly, with Q, this is a book title that came up in one of the decoder's videos. He took a trip code from a Q message, put it into a book search, and came up with this title, The Story of Q. I haven't read the book yet. If I do get to it, it's not something I would naturally want to read. It sounds like another one of those beautifully, entertainingly written books that's about convincing people that it's okay to just accept nature and die. Because the author has some comments in her WordPress blog saying that religion shouldn't be about getting eternal life. This is not something I want, because it seems to me the whole point of having a belief system is to have it help you get better health and not die. But this is the stance taken by the author in one of her WordPress posts. So then, if you're going to subvert established religion, and the Q documents, according to their criticizers, are very much about doing just that, because they postulate that there must have been an unfound document for which there's no evidence, called the Q document, which was the predecessor to the synergic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, because there's so many similarities among these books that they must have drawn from a common source, which has, of course, since conveniently disappeared. So this is not something that's viewed favorably by Orthodox believing Christians, because they see it as questioning the premise that the Gospels were divinely inspired. In the terms that might have been used in Salman Rushdie's day, had this been written about Islam. The problem is that saying that something is not divinely inspired from a presumably holy book is in that context referred to as saying that they are satanic verses. So if you say that there's either an unwritten source or a written source nobody has found that contains the true message of the Gospels, you have a sort of internally, it seems to me, self-contradictory message, and not a message that is approved by Orthodox religion. All of which would presumably be against the beliefs of a good number of the people who follow Q. And all of which led me to talk about, because I found this monopod. It sounds to me, as I've said, like a disease, but then it takes on this comic tone to it, because it sounds like a disease that's spread by kissing, but not by kissing the mouth, because the pod means foot. So if there were such a disease, it would be spread by perhaps kissing someone else's feet, or putting one's own foot in one's own mouth. Perhaps like the concept of the advertiser who came up with the idea of calling the thing a monopod. But if you've followed some of the other posts by the decoders lately, they like to talk about In Pursuit of Truth, with the guy who made the link to the Q book, has posts about Tom Hanks repeatedly posting pictures of single discarded socks, or someone wearing only one sock. And in all the talk of protests lately, and wondering whether we should all be out on the streets protesting, because presumably in trying to contain this virus, a lot of authorities are taking a great number of unwarranted steps, perhaps, in curtailing people's liberties. What is the best way to be protesting? Should we be protesting mono a mono, one on one, or one against one? This is how you can tell you're on the right trail with this trip. You always follow the hazard signs. Anytime there's an intersection in the trail, and this is from experience, where you can take a wrong turn, you always follow the most potentially hazardous route. So, I'm wondering, wouldn't protests be more effective? Maybe there are experts who've long since tried this and found that it didn't work. I'm not an expert on the subject. But things like the Great Escape toward the end of World War II, people opened up a second front by separating and making large numbers of the enemy chase after each one of them. So if you have something to protest, then following the Great Escape model, you wouldn't go in one big group where the authorities could easily round you up. You'd do the protesters' equivalent of social distancing and protest in ones. Then, if the authorities came, shut you down with their loudspeakers, and they order you disperse immediately. I'm the only one here, officer. Don't get smart with me. I'll turn you into a monopod. The other thing that was alluded to in Pursuit of Truth's post was a couple of books on extraterrestrials. There's another thing that I think of when I hear the word monopod, is that they might be some extraterrestrial species who consider themselves far more advanced than earthly tetrapods. Most animals, like amphibians, reptiles, and mammals, have 4 limbs, not 1. They would say that they'd reached a higher level of evolution by being monopodal. Another couple of meanings I found on Q lately, just to be contrarian, because I love all this stuff to be true. That all the world's most horrid criminals are being rounded up as we speak under the cover of this virus scare, and are about to be brought to justice and lead us into an era where anti-aging and a host of other technologies will be released to us. I'd love all that to be true, but I found some other meanings. When you look up Q as a movie title, it's called Q, the Flying Serpent. It's a movie from 1982, and admittedly, most of the people who die in this movie, as far as I can tell from the summary, are mafia types, fortunately. But I don't think they're all guilty. And the Q stands for Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. Now, feathered serpent, to a standard Christian, should raise a couple warning flags. Now, Quetzalcoatl was a relatively benign deity for his time. He was, in a bloodthirsty time, presumably, not as inclined to offer people up for human sacrifice as some of his other deities of the same pantheon. Nevertheless, that sort of thing presumably did go on in Mesoamerican civilization. Also, another feathered serpent is a symbol of Hermes, Greek god of many things: messengers, commerce, thieves, trickery, and he did a lot of thieving in his day. His symbol was the caduceus, a medical symbol with a pair of snakes coiled around a staff and with wings on it. So although we have hopes of moving to an order in the world that is more benevolent than the past one, it doesn't seem like they're quite pure in calling their enemies satanic. And most of the symbolism they use, and they say to their opponents that symbolism will be their downfall, is associated with serpents. Oh, I don't want to burst anybody's bubble. And maybe none of this stuff is justified in saying. I don't know. But I think people ought to look into all the potential meanings when you have all these clues being dropped through the titles of books and movies. And yet, nobody's looking at the meaning of the most important title or the most important movie. Q is, in that sense, anonymous. Because I can't find any of the Q posters talking about the literary or film meanings of Q. Oh, that might be close to all I can get taped because it's getting a little dark. But I'll continue as long as film permits. Oh, it sounds like we have another train. Maybe I could talk a little about autism while I'm at it. Autism's tied in with a lot of these potentially mass depopulation influences, like vaccines. If autism is indeed caused by vaccines. I found on one YouTuber's channel someone called Yo Sam D Sam a number of signs that autism is becoming essentially a fandom. A group of people who engage in collective fanish behaviors such as trying to guess or attribute other people to their group based on subtextual meanings in books and films and so on that they interpret in a somewhat different way from how others interpret them. A behavior which might be displayed, whether someone is autistic or not, is suggestive enough to put somebody into the autistic camp. Even when, in romantic fashion, there's no moral distinction of who one places in one's camp. People are simply lauded and counted as one of the in-group simply because of their stated or implied status of being on the spectrum. I've talked about this before in my video on Greta Thunberg. And one thing I found really strange about this is that Yosemite Sam had a video on imposter syndrome. syndrome, as she referenced it, was about doubting whether she really was autistic or not. Sometimes she'd feel like an imposter because she wasn't sure if she was autistic. This is not a standard definition of the term. Imposter syndrome is supposed to mean that one cannot accept one's accomplishments as having been the product of one's own efforts, despite substantial evidence to the contrary. Harry Potter is one example cited in another YouTuber's analysis as being someone who has imposter syndrome. He finds it very difficult to take credit for anything he's done. With respect to autism, this raises a whole boatload of questions. Why are all these people grouping together under the banner of a term which no one has really properly defined? A little like you, perhaps. There's also an emphasis on the in-group versus the out-group. It's quite tribal or even biblical in some respects. But there are many ways that autism is confused with achievement. In many ways it could be related to imposter syndrome. I've actually seen an example of this in a post by a self-described person on the autistic spectrum, saying that because it had to overcome limitations imposed by the condition of being on the autistic spectrum, they didn't feel like they'd earned their achievements. This is a double imposter syndrome. Presumably, someone who has what would be under the circumstances in which one must strive against limitations imposed by the autism to achieve, then that person should feel that they've accomplished even more because they had such a more difficulty in doing what they had to do. So, that person, having overcome a handicap to achieve, and still feeling like, in this case, she had not accomplished something, is exhibiting signs of imposter syndrome. This article, anything resembling it, was not, however, referenced by Yosam D. Sam. The one response I got to my comment on this, left under the video by Yosam D. Sam on imposter syndrome, was from one of the other people who said that the sense of accomplishment came from putting a name and a diagnosis to her or his condition. But that's an imposter syndrome form of accomplishment in that they applied an imposter definition of imposter syndrome in order to come up with the satisfaction of getting the diagnosis. Okay, I can see you rewinding the video 2 or 3 times to try and understand that one. As it's getting darker, might be time for me to shut this thing off anyway. Let you ponder that for a while.